QSO Today, episode 508, Bob Wertz NF7E. This episode of QSO Today is listener-sponsored. Only you can keep the QSO Today podcast coming to you every weekend since 2014. Please become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor banner on the show notes page or at the top of the QSOtoday.com webpage. I want to thank Andrew Cornwall, KF7CCC, for his generous donation of a transcription of our last episode 507 with Bob Finney, K5TEC. It will be up soon. I want to also thank the regular monthly sponsors who are listed on the show notes page. Your donations, transcriptions, and listener sponsorships are the most important way to demonstrate that you appreciate QSO Today. It takes hours a week to produce each episode and to host the finished product where you can download it and enjoy it. Please donate any amount on a regular basis to show you care and help me keep it going. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, amateur callsign 4Z1UG, where I demonstrate the diversity and relevance of the amateur radio hobby and its impact on society by interviewing ham radio operators, many of whom played vital roles in shaping our technology through the amateur radio hobby. And while many people might say, ham radio? Do people still do that? This podcast demonstrates through in-depth interviews just how amazing, diverse, and dynamic the amateur radio hobby continues to be. I am in the United States until the end of the week before returning to Israel. My brothers and I have been liquidating our late father's home and things. I am numb from this experience, and while I appreciate the monetary side of inheritance, sorting through endless boxes, drawers, cupboards, and shelves of stuff leaves me not wanting any of it. I'm returning only with some crystal goblets for the XYL and Ziploc bags full of buttons for my granddaughters. My orientation towards stuff has changed, causing me to dedicate myself to cleaning out my attic now, shop and office. Our kids don't want our stuff. My advice for what it's worth. Amateur radio operation for Bob Wertz, NF7E, is a family affair, beginning with regular round-table rag chews with his brother and father. Bob likes to chase DX, confirming over 340 DX entities with the latest, Bouvet Island 3YOJ, his crowning achievement. His Flagstaff Arizona Ham Radio Club special events, including Route 66 and Quartzfest, provide ample opportunities to get out and meet the hams. NF7 tells his ham radio story in this QSO Today. NF7E, this is Eric 4Z1UG. Are you there, Bob?
Hi, Eric. This is NF7E, Bob Wertz in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Can we start at the beginning, Bob, of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
Well, it was kind of a long, slow process for me to get into ham radio. Back in 1950, I was 10 years old, and I was living in a small town in northern Illinois, 50 miles north of Chicago and about 1 mile south of the Wisconsin state line. The town was Antioch, Illinois. That was home for me for the first 18 years of my life. And while I was there, I was in the basement of our house. My dad had moved around some boxes, and I found a box that was open, and I was wondering what all of those postcards were in that box. At least I thought they were postcards. And I was kind of intrigued. I was looking at them, and most of them were cards that weren't photo cards. They had numbers and letters on them, and they were made out to my dad, his first and last name in Antioch, Illinois, and had a 1-cent stamp on them. And I thought, what are these? And then some of those were made out to my dad and what I found out was his call sign, W9MSC. And others were made out just W9MS7, W9MSC, Antioch, Illinois, with no address, and yet they got to him. So I found out they must be related to radio, because a few of them had a note on their radio station, W9MSC. So when my dad got home, I asked him about that, and I said, what's this all about? And he said, well, he was interested in amateur radio at a young age of 21. He studied and got his license, which was W9MSC. And he had a chance then to get on the air after he made his transmitter and his radio, his receiver, and he talked to people throughout the country. And then there was one particular card he showed me that was from South America. And that really got me interested. How could you do that from this little town in Illinois? Back then, it was lucky you could make a phone call, and there was no such thing as cell phones or any of the other modern conveniences we had. So that was the spark that started me on the path of ham radio.
So being a 10-year-old in Antioch, Illinois, you were at the end of the world, or you could see the end of the world from there. I've got a sense of how that was. So it seems to me that family is a big part of amateur radio for you. Is that right?
It is a very big part. It is amazing what has happened over the years. So to fast forward, when I got my license in 1976, I was in Arizona and my dad was in Illinois. And I took a class here offered by the Coconino Amateur Radio Club, and I got my license, and I called my dad on the telephone to tell him about I'd been studying and taking this class and ended up with a license, and he was thrilled about that. Now, back then, he was on the air from 1932 to 1941, and when the war broke out, when World War II came about, he was licensed, and the federal government required him to not only dismantle his station, take the antennas down, but they wouldn't even allow them to store the transmitter and the receiver in the same room. So at that point, he was off the air until I got my license in 1976. He immediately retested, got his license. So now the two of us are on the air talking to each other almost on a daily basis, 1,200 miles apart. And that led to so many other things. My dad was licensed. I was licensed, and then my brother, who was living in Florida, was also interested in what we're doing. He got licensed. And in the process, we were all raising our families, and he had a daughter that was interested, and she was licensed. In fact, she married a gentleman in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who was also a ham and radio operator. His Don Buska, N900, is still active on the air. At that point, there's quite a few of us, and I had two grandsons that I got involved. So now I think there was a total of 7 of us in our family that were licensed, and which was quite a fun thing for all of us.
Can we go back a little bit to your father's World War II experience? If he had to pack up all the radios and take everything down, it was obvious that the government didn't want amateur radio operators on the air. But with your father's technical and on-the-air skills, was there anything that he could do during World War II to provide some expertise that might have been missing then?
I didn't hear any stories about that, but he was, had 4 kids, 4 harmonics, and he was, he had a business of drilling water wells in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. And he did a lot of that, and that brought up another phase of my introduction to radio. That at that point, he would take a well machine and he would go out to a site where they were building a new home. And so there wasn't any electricity, there wasn't any phones. And of course, back then, again, no cell phones. So he would at times need a part, or he'd need something at the well site, and he hated to shut the machine down, run into the closest phone booth and call my mother, say, I need another length of pipe, or I need some plumbing equipment or electrical equipment, because he did the whole job from drilling to installation, or it was a turnkey operation. So how did we solve that, or how did he solve that? He was working at a place called Wonder Lake, Illinois. That was about 25 miles from home. And he had the idea, well, maybe we could install CB radio at home, and I'll put one in the truck. And that way I wouldn't have to leave the job site. I could just get on the CB, call home, and tell his wife what he needed. Well, that was a good theory, but CB wasn't very reliable and wasn't strong enough, 5 watts, to always make that trip. So that's where I came in. At that point, we had to come up with a better way to reach each other. I was 15 years old, I think, at the time, and I found a book, and it was titled, I have it, in fact, in front of me, Build It Yourself, Antennas for Citizen Radio Service. And in that book, there was a number of different antennas, dipoles and ground-mounted verticals and quads. And towards the end of that book, there was an article about building a beam for citizen band. And I looked at that and I talked to my dad about that. And he says, well, we got just about everything down in his workshop that we would need in the way of the aluminum and the wood and the brackets and that type of thing. So I built a beam, not knowing anything about it. And I put this thing together, and the suggested boom was a 2x4, 10 long. So we made some modifications there. And I put that beam up with his help. And of course, it was vertically polarized. So we pointed that the direction where he was working 25 miles away. And that made all the difference. Now we could talk to him and he could hear us and I could hear him. And so when he needed parts, it became a really important aspect of his business. So that was kind of the second phase of my interest in radio and where it all started for me.
It sounds to me like you had the opportunity to maybe go into the family business, since you seem to be active in the family business as a teenager. Did you in fact do that, or did you go on for education somewhere else?
Well, interesting question. I would have liked to have gone on, work with him, but I couldn't do that. I had health problems, asthmatic problems back there. I just could not live in that atmosphere. Environment. That's why we ended up out in Arizona, and it was a good move for us. So I worked with him when I could, when I was feeling okay, but and he put in 3,500 water wells in that part of the country. He became quite an authority on it, and but we both ended up on the radio and had many years together on that. It was just wonderful memories that we had. It got to the point where when my brother got licensed, he being in Florida, I being in Arizona, and my dad being in Illinois, we would get together every Saturday morning. Now, on the radio, and we would kind of have a round table. What'd you do this week, and what's going on with the family, and that type of thing. And that was, to me, that was probably the most enjoyable part I had of ham radio to date. It was back then. We had to pay for phone calls. So if I was to call Illinois, there's a charge. If I was to call Florida, there was a charge. So we used the one ringer system.
Right. I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
So I would dial my dad or my brother one and let it ring once, and I'd hang up. And that was a clue for them if they were at home to get on 14257, 20 meters, and we would then talk about whatever we were going to talk about. So lots of great times. My dad became a silent key in '98, but we had such a incredible time together with our radios. It was an important part of my life.
I'm curious, do you think that the reason that you had so many family members become amateur radio operators is because of this three-way conversation that you and your brother and your father had, and maybe this idea that the other family members wanted to either join or emulate that?
Well, that's another interesting question. I'm not sure what it was. I think the fact that the family knew how much we enjoyed doing this, that I think everybody wanted to get involved in this. But I have a very interesting story about why I'm here today. And that is in 1932, when my dad got his license, he was single. And there weren't very many ham operators back in his part of the world. So he found out of a few other hams in that area. And one of the hams' name was Bert Anderson. Now, Bert Anderson lived about 12 miles away from Antioch in a place called Loon Lake. And Bert had a radio repair shop. He was a ham. My dad found out about him, so he would go down there when he was looking for parts to add to or change in his radio, and he got to know Bert. And while he was there, he had a chance to meet Bert's wife. Her name was Pearl, and Pearl had a sister by the name of Dorothy. The young gal was about my dad's age, and he kind of took a liking to her, and they dated for a number of years, actually a couple of years, and they ended up getting married. So I'm here because of ham radio. You might be talking to an empty mic at this end otherwise.
Besides the rag chew with the family, what is your favorite operating mode?
I mainly like the sideband. I do some CW. I'm not real great at CW, but I love to sit and visit with these people. That gets me in trouble when I operate contests because I meet so many interesting people that during contests, I want to stop and visit, and it slows down my progress for my contest, but it's all fun and games. So
I saw that you like to chase DX and that you've logged now 340 DX entities, maybe more than that now. What was your approach, and how long did it take to complete this milestone?
It all started when I got my license. Again, going back to the fact that I found that QSL card from South America. That intrigued me. I thought I would like to do that even at that young age. And so when I got my license, and then when my dad got on the air, the two of us started working DX. And when I would work a new one or he would work a new one, that one ringer would happen and one of us would be telling the other one about, hey, I just worked Israel, or I just worked Japan or South America or Africa. And if I worked them, then my dad would be chasing them. And he worked them, then I'd be chasing the one he was trying. And through the first 21 or 22 years being on the air, we were neck and neck all the time, chasing DX with the entities. I think when he passed away, we both had something like 282 entities. So that there was more to just working those. It was almost friendly competition with the family.
And 340, does that represent all of the possible entities now, or is that pretty close to the almost all the possible?
That was all of them. I've chased DX. I've really enjoyed every one of them. And I never thought I would get to the top of the DXCC honor roll, but I made that just last year when I worked Bouvet Island. That was my 340th one. Bouvet was really tough to work. I made that contact using CW, and I guess it was an appropriate way to finish my working all the DX entities, because I listened and I listened day and night. I knew that if I didn't make that contact with Bouvet, I wouldn't probably have another chance in my lifetime. So I was the only one up here in Flagstaff in northern Arizona that I know of that worked them. And I worked them twice on 17 meters CW. And that was such a thrill, but I didn't think that would be the one that would be the most difficult. I know you're probably thinking North Korea would be the most difficult, and I happened to work them in 2002 on sideband. It was one of those things I didn't realize how important that one was until years later. But the one I thought that would be the most difficult was the one that in Mount Athos. That was the place in Greece where there's over 2,000 monks, and one of them was a ham. And I thought I would never be able to work him. And one morning I was on and I heard him, and I worked Monk Apollo was his name. And that was quite a thrill for me. That was almost as exciting as working Bouvet. So it's only taken 46 years for me to work all of them. I have an additional 5 deleted countries. So I actually have 345 countries confirmed.
Now, what does that mean, deleted countries? Countries that no longer exist?
Countries that no longer exist. You know, there's times in the world when countries are absorbed by other countries.
Like Yugoslavia, for example.
Yes, right. And so you work those before the countries before they are busted up, so to speak. What was the one in Africa recently? The South Sudan now is a new one. Before it was just Sudan. So those are entities that we all look for, and some of these folks have more than 350 entities they've worked. It's exciting for me, even today, and work some of these entities on a different band. That's exciting. I do my DXCC dance when I work those.
Well, we're on video. You could show us what that DXCC dance looks like, but I won't ask you to do that. What's the current rig there?
I've always used Kenwood products. I started out with a TS820, and I've used a TS120, a TS140, a TS. my favorite rig of all times was a TS-850S. But now I have a TS-890S, and I love that rig. I'm still getting to know it. But that TS-850S that I had, I used that so much, I actually wore it out. I mean, it got to the point where you could not read any of the buttons on there. There might be a button for CW. The CW is gone, and so is sideband, and all these different modes, the automatic tuner and all that, because I used it so much. I still have that radio. It has the little problem with the tuner, but I still use it occasionally. So I'm a dedicated Kenwood operator.
Did you work all of your DX entities barefoot, or do you run it with a power amplifier? And what kind of antenna assembly do you have out there on the compound?
Well, my first antenna was I lived in the west side of Flagstaff in a neighborhood where homes were pretty close to each other, and I had a hard time trying to put up anything other than a wire, and I finally ended up with a Wilson crank up tubular tower, and I put it's called a HQ1 mini quad on it. It was a small antenna, one driven element and one reflector. The reflector kind of looked like a diamond shaped on the back, almost like a TV antenna. And I worked my first 100 countries using that. And then I decided, I really enjoy this ham radio venture. And so we ended up buying a home on the other side of town, Flagstaff. I'm on 3 acres now, and I have room to put up. Right now I have a 60-foot tower with a Force 12 C4 on it, and I worked the rest of my countries on that antenna. So in terms of the amplifier, I have tried a number of amplifiers over the years. He hit, I think it was SP 300. I don't remember exactly what that was. I had a 10-tech Centurion amp. Right now, I'm using the one I favor. It's the Alpha 99 amp, and that's just a stable amplifier and put out as much power. I could probably melt my antenna elements if I cranked it all the way up.
It's my understanding that you like to work 160. Have you become a top band expert?
Well, no, 160 was a real challenge for me. I think the reason I like 160 is it is such a difficult band to work. I haven't worked a lot of countries on 167. I think I have a total of 67. I think 63 confirmed and the others not confirmed. And that was tough. I've tried a number of different antennas. I tried a balloon antenna on 160. That was fun. I left it up overnight, brought it down the next morning. It was coated with ice. The balloon shriveled up, and that was into my balloon antenna. I've tried a coaxial inverted L. That's where you load the shield of the coax rather than the center conductor. And I configured that inverted L configuration. So I've done a lot with 160, but the problem is the older you get, 160 is a nighttime band, and it's getting very difficult for me to stay up, to do that. But I really enjoy 160. It is the gentleman's band. I've never met anybody on 160 that wasn't like family, just a great group of people. I would encourage any ham to get on 160 if they like to rag chew and they really like to meet some great individuals. That's where it's at.
Now, are you operating AM on 160 when you're meeting those great individuals? It's my understanding that there's a whole large group of 160 and 80 meter operators who like to operate surplus broadcast transmitters or something similar.
Yeah, a lot of them do the AM program. I really never got into that. When I was on 160, I got to know so many locals. When I say locals, maybe within 1,000 miles of home, and it became almost like a breakfast club. If you get on early in the morning, they were all there, and you got to know them and what they were doing and what kind of antennas they were working, and just share fun things we were all interested in. So I kind of miss that because right now I don't have a 160 antenna, but I spent many years doing that.
How important have radio clubs been to your ham radio career over the course of the years that you've been a ham?
That's interesting. When I started out, I had an Elmer. His name was Bill Shuckman, W7 Yankee Sierra. He was from the Potomac Valley Amateur Radio Club. He was one of the founding members there. I'd like to say a little bit about Bill. Bill was a CW operator that when he sent CW, it was like listening to a symphony. He had absolutely a beautiful fist. It was so easy to copy him almost at any speeds. He was my first contact on the radio. So Bill was in a club that helped me get my license, the Coconino Amateur Radio Club. So I joined that club, and I down the road I became president of that club. And I found that there's two ways to really enjoy the hobby. And one is to get on the air and meet people, and the other is to join a club where everyone is doing what you're doing and sharing ideas and working together on projects and events. And so the clubs have been extremely important to me. Back in about 1983, we decided that a number of us local here decided we would like to maybe branch out and be more dedicated to contest and DXing. And so we started the Northern Arizona DX Association. I'm a charter member of that, and I think there was maybe 10 or 12 of us in the club at that time. That has become a very important part of my ham career. I'm associated with a group of people then and now that are just first class hams that you like to hang around with and deal with. They all have the same attitude and are really interested in these areas of ham radio. So I ended up president of Northern Arizona DX Association. That was quite a while ago. And then maybe 10 years later, they re-elected me as president. So I was 2 terms president of the existing Northern Arizona DX Association, and just an incredibly active and fun group to be with. So it played an important part in my career, ham career.
Did you find that being a part of an amateur radio club either accelerated your ham radio knowledge or you helped other people to accelerate their ham radio knowledge to be successful amateur radio operators?
I think it's both of the above. So many hams that were older than me shared their experiences and their know-how, and it turned out that was important to me. And then as I get older and the newer hams come in, I also have a chance to share some of my knowledge with them. So I strongly feel it's important, if you're a ham, that you need to be into a club.
I think you're right. I remember as a kid being in an amateur radio club, and the Elmers were like amazing. It really made all of the difference to ham radio success. In 2022, it sounds to me like you were made Arizona Ham of the Year. Who made this recognition, and what was the greatest takeaway from it?
Well, that was quite an honor for me. They have every year had a Arizona Ham of the Year, and to be in the company of some of these other hams is just quite an honor. It came about mainly because of our fairly new president when that came about. We had a gentleman, he's still with us. His name is Mike Hanks, W7QS. And Mike was a fairly new ham. He came around in 2019, got his license along with his dad. That was quite a story. And he joined our club and got quite interested in what we were doing. And we're such a small club. We're kind of running out of people to become president. So Mike turned his head, and we nominated and railroaded him into the presidency. Mm-hmm. And Mike has been such an incredible member of our society, not just local, but he has brought so many things. And he and I have had a lot of interaction together, working together as president. I told him I would help him any way I could. And over the few years, he got to know my background, and I've done a lot for the club, but so has Mike, and he nominated me representing the club. He was president at the time. So that was, like I say, that was quite an honor. One of the other people that you may have heard of that's also a member of the Arizona Amateur Radio Ham of the Year was a guy by the name of Senator Barry Goldwater. Just about everybody knew Barry. I was fortunate enough to actually meet him and talk to him, and I had some conversation back and forth, and I have some letters from him. But Barry was Ham of the Year, I believe it was in 1978. And to be in that category, he was such an incredible ambassador for amateur radio, that to be in that category, I feel like I don't know if there's anything better for me. So, and I've had a chance to share that with many hams, new hams. I like to hand out a QSL card to them. I was over in Williams yesterday with Mike Hanks, and we presented Mike has taken on the role of VE coordinator, and we had, I think, 6 people show up, 5 new hams, and I was able to hand out my card. On my QSL card, it says Ham of the Year, and I usually write a note on there, something about, here's my phone number if you need help, give me a call. We don't like to just bring these people into ham radio. We like to mentor them and get them involved in ham radio. There's a lot of people that have licenses that have licenses just to have them, I guess. I like to see them active. But so my Ham of the Year award was extremely surprise to me, one I will cherish forever.
And now this mid-show break. Every 2 weeks, I listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast with George, KJ6VU, Vince, VE6LK, Mark, N6MTS, Thomas, K4SWL, Michael, VA3MW, and Rod, VA3ON, and their guest on often topical and important projects in amateur radio. This discussion amongst the regulars and their guests remind me of the conversations that I used to listen to on 146.94 and 146.46 megahertz in Orange County, California, while working on my own workbench almost 50 years ago. It is amazing how much practical ham radio knowledge that we can absorb by listening to the Workbench podcast that starts to make sense when we start our own deep dive into our own projects. So join me by listening to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast now and as George and crew push beyond 200 episodes. You can get to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast by clicking on the banner in this week's show notes page. And now, back to our QSO. What kind of demographic of new hams are you seeing coming in through your VE program? Are you seeing younger people, or is younger 35?
Yes, unfortunately, we don't see a lot of the younger ones, and we're trying to do something about that. We talk about being in a club and how to get these younger generation involved in ham radio. If they don't have a computer in front of them, they're not happy. So now with the FT8 and those type of things, we're hoping that may create a new wave of hams that want to get into it. But the young people we see are not young. That is, they're 30-ish or 40-ish, and they're getting involved. Many of them, I believe, are preppies for just in case there's ever a meltdown in the world. And but what our club has done, thanks to Mike Hanks that I mentioned earlier, we do so many special events. We do things that clubs 3, 4, 5 times our size don't even operate as many special events as we do. A good example is last year in this, and I know we're getting off the subject of younger hams, but to understand where I'm going with this, our special events are creating some new opportunities for us. Last year, we have a membership of maybe 25 hams. That's not very much because some of these ham clubs are 300-400 people. But of our 25, most of them are extremely active with what we do, which is great. And so here's what a typical year involves for us. In January, we go down to Quartzsite, Arizona, where they have what's called Quartzfest. It's a week-long camp out in the Sonoran Desert where 500 to 1,000 hams show up, everyone with tents and campers and motorhomes and anything you can camp in. And we stay there for a week, and we have seminars and programs. And during that, we bring our club trailer, which we have purchased a couple of years ago, down there. And we use that as a place for anyone that comes into the Quartzfest to operate what's called W7Q, the Quartzfest Special Event Station. So that's one of our events. At the same time, down on Quartzsite, we also we carry on an event called the Distance Challenge. Now, I created that event back in 2019, and that is, I was going to Quartzfest for a couple of years, and I didn't see any kind of activity like that. And I thought, I'm a contester. If I went to something like that, I'd like to have something like that to participate. Guys come down there and they put up their antennas, everything you can imagine. It looks like Antenna City down there, spread out in the desert. And so we created a challenge for them. See who could make the longest HF contact from Quartzsite. Now, this is in the 5th year, I believe, we just finished. And so that's another event we created but that's not all. In the following month, in February, we go to Lowell Observatory, and we signed up with them, committed to a 10-year special event involving the discovery of the planet, or should I say dwarf planet Pluto. Every year in February, on the February 18th, they celebrate the fact that Pluto was discovered here in Flagstaff at Lowell Observatory.
Didn't we decide, Bob, that Pluto in the end is not a planet?
Well, there's a lot of controversy about that.
Yeah.
In our discussions on our special event about Pluto, just about everyone we talked to say, I still consider Pluto a planet. It was in my science book when I went to high school, and so it's got 5 moons.
Oh, really? Well, then it should be considered a planet. Last week, before the last episode, I discovered a database called N8CIA Ham Search. And I just want you to know that Kingman, Arizona has 765 licensed hams, if you can believe that.
How many?
765 licensed hams. Some of them could be silent keys, until their licenses expire. But in terms of current licenses in Kingman, it's 765. I find this mind-blowing. Just if you're looking for marketing information, I know where to direct you.
Yes, okay. It's my understanding in the state of Arizona, there's like 21,000 licensed hams. Now, they're not all active, but when you talk about, if you just look up our zip code, I think there's like, in my zip code alone, there's like 5 pages of amateurs that are listed on QRZ.
That's right, in your zip code. According to N8CIA, there's 42,454 hams in Arizona.
When you think of that, and when I think I was elected Ham of the Year, that's pretty amazing to me.
You're the top dog there.
I guess I am. But there's certainly many others I know that are worthy of that. And we have nominated one of those just recently. So we'll see what happens. But if we could get back to the special events, January we do 2 in Quartzsite. February we do the one in Lowell Observatory in Pluto. And then June we do Field Day. In September, we do Route 66 on the Air. Now that was an event that our club created back in 1999. We were all sitting around and decided, we need to do something besides contesting and DXing. What would it be like if we could be at the other end of a pileup? And one of the guys says, maybe we should put Grand Canyon on the air. Now, we live about an hour drive south of the Grand Canyon. And they said, well, if we do that, we all got to drive up there and set up equipment and come back. If we do it for a week, we got to figure out where to stay. And so that was kind of side tabled. And then somebody else, a guy by the name of Jerry Ellison, W7ST, lived west of town here. And he says, why don't we do something with Route 66? He says, we could go downtown Flagstaff and we could set something up in a station, maybe at the city complex, City Hall, and operate. And of course, there was a lot of discussion. You think that would work? You think anybody really is interested? And we talked about that. And I said, well, if we're going to do that, that was my idea. I said, why don't we just line up stations all along Route 66 from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California? And
from Joplin, Missouri.
Right, exactly. And
Gallup, Flagstaff, Kingman. I'm looking at the song. I'm looking at the song lyrics. I apologize.
That was by Bobby Troop. Get Your Kicks on Route 66.
Route 66. That's right.
That became part of our first Route 66 on the air, because the president of our club at that time said, we were all saying, well, yeah, let's do that. How do we find hams in these cities along Route 66? And the president of the club says, let's concentrate on all of the cities and towns that are mentioned in the song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66. So the first year we had 12 cities in there.
Yeah.
Flagstaff, Arizona, don't forget Winona. We had those too.
San Bernardino, you had Joplin, Oklahoma City is mighty pretty. These are great idea that was.
We had no idea that would last or not. We just finished our 25th year. And the first year it generated like 12 or 13,000 QSOs. And we thought, wow, that's incredible.
Can you get a t-shirt or a hat for the Route 66 on the air event?
You get a QSL card. The interesting part about that is now it is 25 years later, and it has become such a large event. Actually, after the first 2 years, it got so large, our club couldn't handle it. We didn't have enough hands and people to take care of all the QSLs. We had certificates we gave out. So we passed it along to the club in California, and they have since built this thing to the point. Last year, it developed or created 72,000 contacts.
Wow.
That's like a DXpedition.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's worldwide. We get calls from every part of the world. We laugh about trying to make DXCC on one of our Route 66 events. We probably have done that. I know one year we had into the 70 countries. So, but anyway, I'm getting off subject here. Special event. So during that Route 66 thing, we have a station in Flagstaff. That call currently is Whiskey 6 Golf. We use a 1-by-1 call. We also have 2 rovers. We're the only club that has 2 rovers, and we go out east of Flagstaff, 1 rover, and west of Flagstaff with the other rover. And we set up and operate during the week. So those are actually 3 more events we do. And then in November, we do our national, last year we did our National Scout Jamboree, took our club trailer out to the scouting camp and put them on the air. And then in December, we do Toys for Tots. And that's an organization funded by the Marines. That's one place we don't operate. We go help them in their warehouse as a club. So that's typical 9 events in 1 year for our little club. Now, when those clubs that are listening to this, I ask them, how many special events do they do? I think those are important to keep your club together, to keep everyone going the same direction, create some excitement, and add some interest to the world of ham radio.
Right. It also keeps all your equipment together. I mean, it seems to me that if a club owns a bunch of stuff for field day that they only pull out once a year, pieces get lost. It can be rather expensive, but it seems to me that have multiple events during the year that you're always pulling that stuff out, or you're always kind of looking at it to see whether it's the right stuff for the right event. I think it's a great idea. I just want to direct you and the listeners to, by the way, that I created a national, international ham radio events calendar database because I couldn't find one anywhere when I wanted to schedule another QSO Today Academy event. So on the QSOtoday.com website is a link to that calendar and you can add an event, and hopefully it will become a comprehensive list of special events, ham radio events that everyone can find out more about and enjoy. That's my 2 cents on that. What excites you the most about what's happening in ham radio now?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think in terms of my personal preference are these special events. I think that gets so many people involved, not just you or your club. It brings in the world in this case. And I think that's when you have those events, you have to let the public know about it. You can't just let the hams know about it. I strongly feel that it's important to bring in media and tell them what you're doing. And I think that's good for the club. I think that's good for ham radio. So I'm kind of, after working 340 countries or entities, I'm now focusing on those type of things. And I still find it exciting.
And do you find that the media tends to be very receptive to amateur radio stories and events and things like this?
Yes, I've written a number of articles myself for QST. One of them was last March. It was in regards to keeping your club active with special events. And I like to, as a professional marketer, I guess you'd say, from my background, my business, I like to bring in radio and TV and any type of media access we have and tell them about ham radio. Right now I'm working on some local media information about upcoming field day. And I think all of those are important to every ham out there. They can't just be a ham and stay in their shack and talk to their buddy down the maybe in the other states or around the world. I think they need to share that with the world. I think that's important.
It seems to me, Bob, that if there's over 700 licensed amateurs in just Kingman, that the regular media finding out about amateur radio events could actually maybe dislodge some of those amateurs that are not on the air or have never gotten a radio. They got a license, but they never took that next step. What do you think about that? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I think that should be done, I would like to see, we have, if you go into QRZ and you put in your zip code, you can figure out how many hams are in that area. What I'd like to see is if we could figure out how to make a mailing list with that. So now that when I send out, and I do a lot of public announcements type things, I would love to be able to direct that to my local community and hope, rather than hope they will receive it, if we had a way to create such a mailing list, I think that would be a big way to get some of these licensed hams that haven't used their privileges for quite a while, to get them back on the air, get them back involved. I think that would be, somebody could do that. That would be a big benefit to every one of us.
One of the things I keep thinking is an opportunity for marketing ham radio, especially to retirees, is like the ARP magazine. Although I can't say that I've ever seen a ham radio article in the ARP magazine.
You know, I'm the kind of guy that takes those kind of things and I'll probably do something with it. That's right. I get the ARP magazine, and I've seen a lot of stories about a lot of actors and scam programs and those type of things in there, but I've never seen one addressed to ham radio, and that might be appropriate for the seniors. I know we're not addressing the younger generation with that magazine, but I find that the older I get, the more I'm enjoying ham radio, because I don't have to get up and around. At my age, my knees hurt, my hips hurt, but when I sit in front of the radio, I can operate contests, I can visit with people around the world, I can still learn. And where would be more appropriate place to to do that. So you watch you see down the road.
I'm going to watch it. Yeah. One of the things I noticed before I moved away, I moved to Israel 25 years ago. There's just a lot of older people who are alone. Their families have moved to other parts of the country. And I think that if there's a disease that old people have in America, it's loneliness. And I think that there's really nothing better than the social side of ham radio, and that there's a great opportunity, even if those hams are only operating for 10 to 30 years, depending upon the gift of health that they may have, that ham radio could be a godsend to the elderly in America and other places as well.
I think I'm the kind of guy that likes to come up with new ideas and jump on them and go with that. And I hope some of the other readers are thinking the same thing, but you've already got me thinking about there's a place for an article that might help us and might help them.
Or maybe just a regular column. Maybe it's 500 words an issue, or I think people like stories, so you have to tell stories to go beyond the article. If it was a regular column in ARP, I'm giving you a lot more work than you probably thought you'd think about. It seems like that's an opportunity. I don't get the ARP magazine. My late father was getting the ARP magazine for many, many years, and I thought the articles were interesting and well written, but as I say, I never saw an amateur radio article in it.
Interesting subject.
You've been so successful writing articles for ARP. Now they're showing up at your VE sessions. What advice are you going to give them as they walk away with their license?
It's important to get on the air. Don't just own an amateur radio license. Use it. Get on the air. Get into a club, and that's one of the advantages of a club. Field ASO, such a good program for that. People that aren't active, what have you. We've got the equipment. We got the antennas, and our trailers equipped with 3 different operating positions. We're completely off the grid. We have solar panels, batteries. We don't run generators anymore. And so if they get into a club, they will have the opportunity to get on the air, even if they don't have the equipment or can't afford it. We have it, and it's theirs to use if they want to join the club. So my advice is, don't just get a license. Get on and use it. Don't be afraid to get on and visit with somebody. They will enjoy it as much as you do.
Well, Bob, I think that's a great way for us to wrap up. I appreciate so much your agreeing to meet with me on QSO Today and talk about your ham radio experience. And it sounds to me like you've had an amazing ham radio life, and you should only continue to have more of an amazing ham radio life. So with that, I want to thank you so much and wish you 73.
Thank you, Eric. I really enjoyed your visit and the 73 from Arizona.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Bob. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in NF7E in the search box at the top of the page. You can sponsor the transcription of this episode or any of the previous episodes by clicking on the transcription button on every show notes page. The cost is $75 per episode, regardless of the length. We will quickly transcribe the episode and give you credit for your sponsorship. Please send us the call sign of the podcast to make sure that we transcribe what you want. Remember that QSO Today is value for value. Please support our project by making a donation or becoming a listener sponsor today. Use our Amazon link before shopping at Amazon, as we receive a small commission on your Amazon purchases. Subscribe to our mailing lists, both my blog and the podcast, and forward the messages to friends and family who would enjoy QSO Today content. Promote us on social media and give us a 5-star rating and reviews whenever you are asked. QSO Today is available on every podcast player and venue, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Podcasting 2.0. Get a Podcasting 2.0 player to make it easy to get your next episode as soon as we publish. My thanks to Ben Bresky, who, as the consummate artist, makes this host and his guests always sound brilliant. Ben also publishes a weekly Jewish history podcast. There is a link to that on the QSO Today homepage. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.